Do you ever delight in watching babies learning to walk? What do you notice? They fall a lot. You never question why they fall. It's obvious they are learning. But why do they get back up? When they put themselves up to try again, why are they smiling and giggling instead of crying? The answer is that they find joy in learning, growing and gaining mastery. This very insightful quote by Susan Fowler has been shared by my next guest, who is Petra Spiteri. Petra is an accredited mindfulness trainer for adults and children. She runs mindfulness courses and helps clients both on a one-to-one basis and as a group, both as families and in the corporate setting. And she focuses on anxiety, stress, reactivity, and worry, and improving emotional awareness and resilience. Some background about Petra: she's a mom of 2 boys who are 11 and 9, and a wife to an emergency doctor who I've had the pleasure of working with in my foundation years as well. Petra is currently studying Gestalt psychotherapy and trauma-sensitive mindfulness in order to add to her resources and to support others. Welcome, Petra. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation to talk about your topic. And without further ado, I would like to go into the first question. Referring back to the quote that I've just read, there is a difference between how children learn and how we learn as adults. And what happens in the process? What makes us change our ways as we grow older?
So I thank you, Antonella, for inviting me to share some thoughts with you. I'd like to start with the proviso that I'm not a child developmental specialist. I'm talking from the outlook of a mindfulness adult and kids trainer, and from a mom's point of view as well. As you said, I have 2 kids. What I can say, what I've had some time to reflect on this, is the fact that when we're children or when we're babies, we're curious. We're curious, we want to taste, touch, we want to discover things. What happens is that then, as we grow older kids or then adults, there are other things that come in. And the other things that come in into our curiosity are maybe judgments of ourselves and our capabilities, judgments of the situation, how it is. There is much more inner talk, which maybe when you're a baby you don't have that level of awareness.
More intuitive when we're very much younger, right?
And this can then block us sometimes. It can put us back because we put up stories in our mind, which sometimes are not really even facts.
That's true.
It stops you. Another thing, maybe even as you grow older, you're more goal-driven. You know, when you're learning something, I have a goal, I want to reach this goal. The thing is, life is so fast sometimes that you say you want to achieve a goal, but you don't really give yourself time to think if that goal is realistic. Is it really achievable? Maybe mindfulness then comes in because you take the time to process it more, observe it more. I don't know if I'm being clear.
Definitely. Now, how about resilience? In children, we observe a lot of resilience when they're learning, especially their first steps, and a lot of information coming their way. How does resilience evolve as we grow older? And how does our resilience, in turn, influence our health behaviors?
Yes, I guess it's best to start by defining what resilience is. So
definitely.
What it is, when I researched it, is it's your ability to recover quickly from a difficulty, from a situation. It's your kind of your emotional toughness. So the thing is, what some people say is that it's not the nature of the adversity, which is important, but how you deal with an adversity. And this is something I'm seeing even from my studies in trauma-sensitive mindfulness, because maybe somebody might think is not traumatic, for example, COVID, they might think, it's a bad year. Somebody else might see it like a traumatic year.
Yes, yes. In fact, there has a lot of, how can I say, a lot of people have really thrived in this situation, while others have, unfortunately, have gone down a very bad path. So some people are capable of recognizing the opportunity in a situation and really doing well, whilst others might consider it a personal tragedy. So that is
Yes.
that is a truth. And how about mindfulness? How would you describe mindfulness, and how can we use it to make healthier choices?
All right, so there are various definitions one can find about mindfulness, but to put it simply, basically, mindfulness is the awareness that arises on purpose to this present moment, non-judgmentally. Now that's the key. Very often we
Right.
burden ourselves. We might stop for a second and think about what action or what we've done, but then the judgments come in. So I'm not saying that when you're mindful, you're a blank slate and you don't have
Yeah,
any
they're still
thoughts.
there, but in the background, right?
But you're aware when they happen. You're aware when they're there. And this has a big impact then on the resilience. If we go back to, for example, how can we be more resilient? How can we bounce back in the face of adversities and recover? There are certain things which hinder us sometimes from bouncing back. In fact, there is something that the founder of positive psychology, his name is Martin Seligman, says there are the 3 Ps which affect our resilience. The first P is personalization. What I mean is that if something happens to you, you always end up blaming yourself. I cannot do this. I am not managing. When sometimes it might not always be necessarily due to
Related to you.
Where does mindfulness come in that? In mindfulness practice, which is various activities, when we're practicing mindfulness, there are meditations that we do, which are not the hypnosis and going far away on a desert island.
Okay.
It's being in tune with myself.
All right, so it's being more present in the moment rather than going in a more of a subconscious state, right?
Yes. So if you're thinking of something and you're, for example, blaming yourself for something that's happening, the mindfulness practice will bring you back there and say, all right, Mela, is it my fault or isn't it my fault? If it isn't my fault, how can I cultivate letting go? If it's not something in my control, how can I work on the letting go? If it is my fault because I'm not managing to do something,
because we have to own responsibility as well, right? When we are responsible for certain behaviors that we do, and how can we address that in that case?
Then what we would do is say, all right, Mela, this is up to me. What can I do to maybe now what I've done in the past? Because mindfulness is awareness of the present moment. What I didn't manage to do till a second ago, I can't change it. It's been done. And there you would work, if you still don't manage to let go of it, on cultivating, we'll talk about it later, self-compassion. But what I can still do, then I will make some plans on what I can do.
And I can see that this really relates to, I often see people who, obviously with healthy eating, because it's the area that I work in, we often have stumbling blocks, and we might, give into a piece of cake or chocolate or whatever. And some people are resilient and mindful, and they say, okay, that's it, it happened, let me continue. Whilst others give up sometimes on the first occasion, and being mindful and resilient would really help. And even these self-talks where you analyze what happened, why, your role in it, and so on, and planning for the future as well. So that is really fitting in beautifully with our behavior regarding to health, right? Now, how about you have touched on what is done during mindfulness.
You've there's other things.
Yes, and would you describe maybe what is done? You mentioned when we were talking the other time about mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Maybe you can describe it a bit more in detail and give us some more information.
Since mindfulness is a way of living, you have to slowly do different practices, because mindfulness is based on the premise that there is what is called neuroplasticity, that the mind, like you take your muscles to the gym, and your mind, you need to take it to the gym.
Yes, definitely.
So slowly, it's usually, for example, the courses that I organize are 6-week courses. With a
So it's giving enough time to allow for that plasticity,
yes,
right?
you build up on it so that you teach your mind to increase this awareness of what thoughts are coming up in my mind right now, whilst I'm asked to ground myself we can ground ourselves, so we get in the present moment with different things, with the breathing, with the sense of touch. But then when you're doing it, very, very often a whole barrage of thoughts come in. So, okay, they came. Once they're there, how do I feel them manifesting in my body? Am I having any tightness in my chest, my shoulders, tension, my jaw? And you don't reject them, because what happens very often in a normal life is when these things happen, they're not
You brush
pleasant.
them aside.
You push them aside. You go on the sofa, watch TV, go on Facebook. So in this 6-week journey, first you understand a bit the mind, how it works when you're under stress. And then each week you discuss different aspects and you understand more and have different meditations on worry, on reactivity and anger, on pain and how much we suffer sometimes on top of the physical pain.
Because the emotional then comes in as well, and it makes it even worse. So it's good. So the person doing the course would be equipped with different tools according to the different situations.
Yes,
So very,
and
very interesting.
even mindful eating, Antonella, I tell them.
Yes.
Actually, we do it in the first session, in the first lesson.
All right.
I give them a raisin, and we have to eat this raisin mindfully. And it's a real big test to patience. We really connect with impatience when we have this raisin in our mouth and we cannot chew it. We have
to wait. Yeah,
because we're too fast. Life is so fast.
And in fact, a lot of problems that we have, like indigestion, weight gain, and other things are related to the fact that we are not mindful when we eat, because we gobble our food up and we don't even realize that we've eaten, and obviously we end up eating more. And another thing as well that you've touched on, we often put our emotions aside, but that does not mean that they have been forgotten, because a lot of our emotions express themselves. And I see this very often in symptoms. For example, you might have eczema, we might have irritable bowel syndrome, for example. Those are all symptoms that come from our tension and stress that we have not dealt with. So finding ways to get our emotions out of us and dealing with them is a very good way to maintain good health. And what are your views on this? Have you encountered maybe some experiences as well?
Sorry, I interrupted you.
It's okay.
Mindfulness started years back. It was basically, it comes far away from the Buddhist practice, but they removed completely the religious aspect out of it.
Okay.
And they started in hospital. It started by this Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. And one of the first practices of uses of it, apart from in stress and in pain, was also in psoriasis. You mentioned the skin,
which is related very much to the psyche. So makes perfect sense.
There's a lot of data. I like I'm a keen believer, because this is actually evidence-based. It's not just some people think it's this yogi guru type of thing.
Yes. In fact, I remember when I went in medical school almost 20 years ago now, the outlook was different. Now we're learning more about mind and body and how we can treat the mind and different modalities that we can use. So as time goes by, there is more awareness about how to treat ourselves in different ways as well. And there's evidence in favor of these practices as well. So you are very right in pointing out that it's not just, fancy talk, it's evidence-based all the way. Now, in fact, there's scientific evidence that shows that mindful meditation helps, first of all, in altering the structures and the functions of the brain, which you mentioned as neuroplasticity. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more on what happens when
Yes.
we are being more mindful.
It's extremely, extremely interesting. What studies have showed is that regular mindfulness practice, as I mentioned, just the meditation. Most of the studies focus on the meditation, but apart from that, what we also do, even in the courses, is the informal practice, mindful eating, mindful taking, when you're taking a shower, you feel the hot water, you smell it.
Taking time to enjoy the
So
whole experience in life, right?
I'll correct you on one thing, not necessarily enjoy. Because that's the thing.
That's
Some
true.
people think it is enjoyment. It is even experiencing something which you might not classify as enjoyable, because mindfulness puts a carpet to whatever is here, even sadness, even fear, or impatience. You're there, you're with it,
And
observing
you're
sometimes something
feeling.
which is uncomfortable, making space with it, and then eventually letting it go. So going back to the evidence that you asked me about, studies show that regular mindfulness practice changes the structure of the mind, of the brain, and the function. They did MRI studies in people before and after doing mindfulness practice for a number of weeks. And the areas of the mind, which are associated, for example, with anger, with hostility, those shrink more, they
All
get
right.
smaller. And the
They become
ones
underactive.
and underactive, and the areas associated with empathy, with compassion, those there's more activity in them, and they actually, this, it's not just the activity and the size. They
And the
found
size as well. So we're actually building brain cells in areas that are going to benefit us, and connections as well as we go along. And it's also important because we're not going to go into it, but a lot of diseases can be prevented through improving our neuroplasticity. So mindfulness is also a way of making sure that we grow older in a more healthy way as well, that we don't maybe have neurodegenerative and other problems as we grow older. Now, we touched on self-compassion in the beginning of our chat. Maybe you'd like to give us more detail about how we can be compassionate to ourselves and why it is a source of strength and resilience as well.
Yes. First of all, what do we mean by self-compassion? Self-compassion, when you're compassionate, you're really, first of all, in tune with your emotions and your sensations in that moment. And then you are being kind to yourself. You want to help yourself. Because you can be aware, but then you're not necessarily, I like to explain it actually is, are you talking to yourself like you're like a good best friend? Or are you flogging yourself like a horse to keep on going? Sometimes we think we're doing it to motivate ourselves. But in reality, the lack of self-compassion doesn't motivate us. It brings us down. It crushes us.
And as women, I feel that we do suffer a lot of this, so that we really treat ourselves in a bad way, especially women and mothers. Self-compassion doesn't always feature, unfortunately.
It's either our culture, I don't know what it is, but it's very, very common in the people I've come across. In fact, that's what I work on a lot, a big dose of learning to love ourselves, because sometimes people might think that learning to love yourself means learning to become selfish. And it's not what we're saying. For example, me as a mother, I take care of myself so that then I am stronger to help my family, my husband and my children.
Yes, sometimes you have to learn it the difficult way as well. There might be an experience in your life that puts you in a situation where you have to learn to be compassionate towards yourself, because for the same reason, if you cannot take care of yourself, rightly so, you're not capable of taking care of others. And you have mentioned some personal experiences that have led you towards this path. Maybe you'd like to share some
Sure.
insight.
In fact, what you said is really for what I think helps me to be resilient. When hard things happen, we have a choice to either crumble under them or else to be resilient and grow from them. And I think before before I tapped into mindfulness, I used other things to help me be resilient. So yes, when I was at school, I was very introverted, very quiet, and I was a bit bullied. In those days, there wasn't much awareness of it. And at that time, my way of being resilient was to push myself to become outgoing. So I spent 20 years working in marketing, to public speaking.
So you went against your, how can I say, your natural inclinations to change your
But
ways, right?
it was good because I didn't have that problem of the personalization where I blamed myself. I said, no, the others were not very nice, but I can do something about it. Let me keep on going. But then what happened was, as I grew older, I noticed that in my heart, I was still the hurt little girl. And to make it even worse, my husband, which, yes, is a doctor and has quite a stressful position in
I can imagine.
There was a lot of stress in our life, a lot of reactivity, anger, worrying. And again, this time in my life where things were not good at all helped me. I see it as a help. A challenge is for me in a way, it can be a help.
Yes, sometimes it's an eye-opener when you have a hurdle, if it's a big one, it really changes your life around.
I decided that it depends on me, that I realized at the beginning, I mentioned the 3 P's of resilience. Another P of resilience is permanence. Some people think that things will never change. It's all doom and gloom forever. For me, it wasn't like that. I said, no, it's not going to be all doom and gloom forever. I want to do something and I'm going to change my life. Let me work on me. Let me learn self-compassion. Let me learn to love myself again. Really love myself, not look good in front of people, but then when I'm alone at home, I'm sad. And the journey started from there. So I learned mindfulness. I learned how to listen to myself and how I'm talking to myself. Is it a story? Is my husband really not caring about me? Or is it maybe his son issue right now? And it's a journey that took a number of years. But
yes. And this is very much related as well, because sometimes we use food to comfort us, and it is obscuring all the other issues that we have. And being more mindful and understanding ourselves will help us for sure detach our emotional attachment to food. And I feel that before you can do that, you cannot really move on, before you find something to replace that gain that we get out of food. In fact, I wanted to ask you, because we often use it, we all do it, we often use food as a reward or as a punishment for sabotaging ourselves. And we're doing really great for some reason, we give into something, and then we feel really bad about it, really guilty, and spend the whole day really upset. How can we apply mindfulness to breaking out of this relationship with food? Maybe you would like to share some practical tips that we can do. You mentioned the raisin, and maybe some other ideas that we can try out as well.
First of all, before we do that, I'll mention one other thing because it's linked to what you said. You mentioned our issue with food and we're never going to manage and everything is bad. The third P, so we mentioned resilience and the 3 Ps. One of them was we're blaming always ourselves. The other one was we think it's always going to be
like that.
The third one is pervasiveness. We assume that because one thing isn't functioning in our lives,
everything else is horrible.
With food, then everything else is tragic, everything else is bad. And this makes it very difficult then to see the silver lining in other things that are happening. Now let's link it to food and weight loss. When we're using food as a reward and we're not mindful, for us, the food is unconsciously an automatic response. We go to food when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling down. There are different ways people go to food. It could be binge eating, emotional eating. There was another one, I can't remember. The attentional eating, where when you see something, you're always just seeing food around you. Is some. Through mindfulness practice, maybe, actually there is evidence, but anyway.
It takes some work, right?
Listen, all right, I enjoy eating, but what else is happening in my life that I am grateful for? what can I connect with that fills my heart as well? The touch of a child, of my son, my daughter, the smell of the fresh air when I go out for a walk in the morning, the hot shower. So you start increasing your awareness emotionally, first of all, of other things that are happening in your life, which are not just food.
Mm-hmm.
And when there is something, when you have an issue with, there's an anger in your life, sadness, you're aware that it's there. And you're more aware of the fact that maybe you are sometimes using food to solve the emotional hurt you have.
Mm-hmm. And it's a vicious cycle then, it makes it even worse.
If you're not aware of the emotion, it just happens. You go and you binge eat.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst with mindfulness, you learn to accept any feelings that come. And instead of acting on them, make space for them and say, all right. And even when you don't manage, when maybe sometimes you just go and you eat, I don't know what,
Mm-hmm.
then the self-compassion comes. Yeah, pacienza, you didn't manage, that thing happened. Then you can practice the meditations and more. So now when that emotion comes again, that caused me to do this, I'll be more aware of its
in a different way. Mm-hmm.
coming up.
In fact, those who manage to find a way to not go into that pattern of eating and then quitting and so on are those who really have success in the end, and because they manage to detach the reward and the gain and the emotional relationship with food, and they treat food more as something that we need to live because it is something that is important and we do enjoy it after all, rather than being the focus of their life. So what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense because it helps us detach our long baggage with food. Maybe some tips that we can even while we're, I don't know, going through a bit of a binge. What can we do to help us slow down and shift our attention, maybe, or when we're thinking about going into binging, for example?
It's not a quick fix. There's no quick fix like in medicine where you just pop a pill when it's happening. It has to be something which you're cultivating on like the sea. When the sea is,
you would do the
calm,
homework before,
and then when the waves come, you're stronger. But for sure, my invitation to everybody is to take some time, even if it's 1 minute in the morning before you start your day and 1 minute later on, to ground yourself, connect with your heart, breathe. So even a minute of feeling that air,
feeling alive,
and notice, are we breathing from up here, from the chest, or are we breathing from down in the belly? Because very often, because of life and how it is, we chest breathe, which makes us very much in fight flight mode. Breathing deeper down from the tummy, from the belly, it stimulates the vagus nerve, your rest and digest system. And taking these deeper breaths maybe can help us to calm down, put a space between the thought of maybe, let me go and open the fridge, and yourself, and say, hey, no, I don't think I need to do this right now. Let me go and do something else, which is nourishing.
So it gives us enough time to catch up on that, how can I say, that train, right? Rather than going full speed to the kitchen, we slow down and give ourselves some more time to understand what's actually happening. Now, maybe some take-home messages for us, both as a professional and as a mother.
Ara, my biggest passion in sharing with the world and why I do all this is for all of us all to really understand the gift that we have. Each day we open our eyes in the morning and we're alive, even if maybe we're woken up and we have somewhere hurting us. We have a gift, it's there, the gift of the present moment. See, it's a present. And let's learn to love ourselves. There might be times where we don't feel very energetic, we feel tired, we just want to go back to sleep. Can I listen to myself? What do I need right now? Can I be empathic towards myself? And remembering that by really listening to what you need, maybe it's a good night's sleep, maybe it's a walk in nature, whatever, any simple thing. Learning to love yourself, because this will give you the strength then to reach out to your children when he comes and tells you, oh, ma, you don't shut him up. Tell me, what do you want? Because you've had time to ground yourself. You've had time to be with yourself. And you're looking at him in the eyes, you're listening to what he's saying, because it's not an easy job being a parent.
No, indeed. And sometimes it's very tiring as well. So it's good to take a step back and allow ourselves to ground ourselves, to calm down as well, and to be more receptive as well to our loved ones and their needs.
Going to the very first thing you told me, the quote, reconnecting as well with this bit of this inner child, in life, when we're adults, we're so responsible. I am responsible. I'm not saying that. Let's learn to lighten up, have fun, get back to doing something fun and silly. We only have one life. Let's live it well. There is the responsibility, yes, but the lightheartedness as well, with whatever we have.
And it helps. In fact, you're reminding me, once I went to a talk, I think I'll close from my side with that. It was a Chinese expert on meditation. He was very elderly. And I think one of the first things he said was, we have to be lighthearted. And he was jumping around and really energetic. And it really struck me because we, how can I say, we carry around so much with us that we not only our soul is heavy, but also our body. So your advice is perfectly valid, and it's good to remind ourselves to do that every day if needs be. Now, Petra, how can you be reached? How can you be followed? Maybe you'd like to share your social media or your website.
I do have my mindfulness page on Facebook. It's a bit long and complicated. Maybe then you can share it.
Yes, for sure. It's
Awake, #2, Life, Mindful Living by Bubbly Me. Because as you can see, even though I teach meditation and mindfulness, I'm quite a bubbly type of person. So they can reach me there or through an email, which is ppmpetra@hotmail.com. And yes, I regularly try to organize classes, sessions to support us all to really live life awake, not just passive.
Thank you very much, Petra, for this beautiful insight. I look forward to sharing it with our guests, and I'm sure that they will gain a lot from this experience as well.
My pleasure to be with you and to reach out to more people.
Thank you very much.